Thank you. Good morning, everybody. How many of you guys have heard of NoEstimates? Could you put your... All right, cool. It's good to be in Sweden. There's a lot more people who've heard about this than in some other countries. I'm going to tell you a few stories about why focusing on estimation not only doesn't work, but it's actually trying to solve the wrong problem. So we talk about complexity today. We talk about how do we remove complexity to achieve some of the benefits that we all hope we would have gotten by now using the traditional project management and delivery frameworks that we've known from the past. If you're interested in Agile, I have a podcast, the Scrum Master Toolbox Podcast. It's a daily podcast for people who are doing this every day, not NoEstimates specifically, but Agile specifically. So it's a hopefully inspiring podcast that gives you short bits of inspiration and actionable ideas every single day because we need inspiration every day. How else would we learn? So that's the goal of the podcast. Now, how many of you guys would like to always deliver on time? Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Me too. How many of you would like to remove the stress and fear of not just delivering late, but delivering the wrong product to the market? Yeah, me too. I would like that too. And for those of you that actually sell the products you deliver, how many of you would like your customers to come back for more? Yeah, me too. I don't understand why people don't want these things. Because you know what does not give you any of those good benefits we just listed? Estimation. It does not guarantee delivery on time. We know that from industry data. The average delay, according to some studies, is 60%. Average delay, that means that some projects will be 200, 300, 500, 1,000% late. That's 10 times longer than expected. While some other projects might be 90% of the original estimate, so 10% earlier or something like that. The problem is that estimation immediately puts you into this almost always late, rarely on time, even more rarely ahead of schedule, dynamic. It's a natural outcome. This is a university, so it's kind of getting into the mood of universities. How many of you guys know what the student syndrome is? Anyone? Okay. The student syndrome is well known by all university students all over the world. It's something nobody teaches you, but everybody learns it like this. And it goes like this. When do you study for the exam? When? The night before. Yeah, you stay up all night, you drink a lot of coffee. Some people drink some, or actually take some heavier stuff than coffee. And they just study and cram, and then the next day they go to the exam. And of course, we know this works because most students do it. Practices don't remain in use unless they actually work. Now, the problem with student syndrome is that the moment it's not only you, the moment there's two people doing this at the same time, whose work depends on each other, you get an amplifying effect. If I do my work the night before I need to deliver it, and Pontus does his work the night before he needs to deliver it, then the only time we can integrate is the day we should have delivered. And of course, that's when you find the problems, right? Everybody knows that. The time when you know how late you are is called system testing, right? Everything before that is just guessing. There's no idea how late we are. Also, estimation doesn't ensure you get what you asked for. And of course, I'm going to preface this by saying that what you asked for is not necessarily what you wrote, because typically what we want is to solve a specific problem, whether it's a process or a business problem. We want to solve a specific problem. And the only way we know what solves that problem is by actually trying to solve it. This is one of the basic things of Agile. It's one of the principles, satisfying customers by early and often delivery of running software. Early and often. Estimation does and assumes the opposite. It assumes that we are taking commitments long term to deliver at a date later on where everybody should work together to deliver on that date. But of course we know, because of the student syndrome, that will not happen. So in the end, you get to find out that what you delivered is not what you asked for. Too late. By the way, that's not Agile, right? One of the key things about Agile is that you deliver early and often. And of course, estimation doesn't ensure market success. And this is easy to justify because the best estimation can do is to give you a fairly accurate guess at when you are going to be ready. But it doesn't even try to handle the question, is this the right thing to deliver? So estimation doesn't give you that either. Now, when you look at this, and you look at the things we all want, why the hell do we estimate? So I wrote the book. The book is available for you for free. So just snap the URL there, and you just put your email, and you get the download link for the book. When I wrote the book, I was trying to solve a very specific problem. I was getting asked by everybody, yeah, but if you don't estimate, how do you know when you're going to deliver? Well, there's many answers to that question, but the very basic answer is you just count the number of stories. And I'll explain that in a little bit, but that's what the book talks about. It talks about some of the other practices as well, critical practices for NoEstimates, like breaking down work so that it can be incrementally delivered, which is something that I thought with this whole Agile thing, that was the purpose, to break down work so that you can deliver incremental, right? One of the key things in Agile was the iterative and incremental delivery of software. Estimation assumes you don't deliver incremental. Also, estimation assumes that you have to deliver everything to deliver anything. This is the opposite of Agile. The underlying theory behind estimation has nothing to do with Agile. And the only reason why we are still using estimation in Agile projects is because the people who came before us were trying to transition from waterfall to Agile. I mean, we're in Sweden, obviously, so we're no longer transitioning from waterfall to Agile, right? Well, I would hope not. But for those of you that have already gone over the bump of the transition from waterfall to Agile, estimation offers nothing of value that cannot be obtained in some other way that is more compatible with Agile. And we'll talk more about that in a second, because first, here's something that estimation will give you. We've talked about the stuff that estimation doesn't give you. How many of you have seen a colleague burn out? So you know firsthand how it looks. I was working in a project, and I was going to ask a colleague for something that I depended on, and I get into the room, and I look around, and Tommy isn't there, and I ask, hey guys, where's Tommy? And they say, he's homesick, he'll come back tomorrow. Okay. Then I go away, I work on something else. Next day I come back, and Tommy still isn't there. And I ask, hey guys, did Tommy say when he's back? Do you guys know? And they say, no, but you better talk to the manager. So I went and I talked to the manager, and I said, my work is depending on something that Tommy needs to deliver, and he's not here. Do you know what's going on? And he turned to me and he said, look, Tommy's ill. Yeah, I know, the guys told me. No, I mean, he's really ill. He's in the hospital. He had a nervous breakdown, and we don't know when he's coming back. We don't even know if he is coming back. Because the thing is, burnout can change who you are. It can fundamentally change the chemistry in your brain. and sometimes you don't recover, to the point that you might not be able to work again. Are these risks worth taking? Because you know what causes this, right? Impossible deadlines, crunch time, uh, completely overblown expectations, lots of people depending on you. And when you really want to deliver, when you really try hard, you take the stress on your shoulders. Of course this is going to happen. How many of you guys have done overtime? Okay. How many of you guys have done weekend work? You see where this is going? And the thing is that estimation does not help you avoid that. In fact, I propose that estimation exacerbates the problem. It creates even more expectations. It leads us to believe that dependencies, time dependencies, can be fulfilled, which is impossible. At least we can't know in advance which ones will be fulfilled. And because of that, we create situations like Tommy's situation, where we can't take the pressure. The biggest waste is that of human potential. But there are other wastes. 1%, this number will, the importance of this number will be clear in a second. I was working in another project years later, the first project where I used one of the aspects of NoEstimates that is described in the book. And I was looking at, are we going to deliver on time? Because that's a question that everybody asks. I was an Agile coach. We were in the middle of an Agile transition. We had a big project. It was about 500 people. That's about 100 teams all over the world, distributed in 4 continents. And my question is, can we deliver on time? Now, in old school project management, you know how you answer that question. You ask everybody to estimate their work. You put that into a neat Gantt chart. And then you find out what the critical path is in your Gantt chart. And you know that the length of the project will be the same as the critical path. That's easy, right? Sure. Now try to do that when 500 people are involved. Do you get them into the same room? Do you start estimating together? How about the dependencies you don't know will happen in the future? How do you find those out? In short, using old school estimation methods for large projects doesn't work. It's not even feasible. How do you get 500 people to give you their estimate of work at the same time? You don't. So what I did, something different. We were 500 people, 100 teams. So every week, some work was being delivered. Every single week, some features were being delivered. And we had the backlog of features. So I started counting those. And after a few weeks, I had enough data to be confident enough to go to Ari. Ari was the program manager. And I go to Ari and I say, hey, Ari, I've been looking at the delivery rate we have. And it's about 30 features per week. And if I look at the number of features we already have in the backlog, and we will discover more, it looks like we will be at least 6 months late. This was a Christmas product, right? It needed to be out in December. And according to the data that I had, it looked like it was going to be out in June. And I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in most of the world, Christmas doesn't wait if you're late with your product. So this was a problem. And I said to Ari, we're not going to meet the deadline. And if we can't hit the deadline, we don't have a product to sell in Christmas. And that's never a good idea. Sales will be mad, marketing will be mad, management will be mad. This is not good. And Ari, program manager, lots of experience, worked in many programs over his long career. He said, let me check that. But of course, being a big guy, program manager with lots of power in the organization, he has a very simple tool to know if people will deliver on time. It's called email, right? You write an email and you ask everybody, when will you deliver? And of course, they do their own private estimation process, whatever that is, and then they deliver the information to Ari. And a few weeks later, Ari comes to me and says, nah, I asked the teams, it's no problem. I asked the teams, and every single one of the teams said, we will deliver on time. And that's when I had this brilliant insight, which should have been obvious from the start, but I never thought about it before, which was that in a complex project where there are multiple teams involved, where you need to integrate the work of multiple teams, the fact that every single team delivers on time has no bearing on you being able to deliver the project on time. So even if all of the teams delivered on time, we would not have been on time. And here's the reason. The reason is that we only find out the problems when everybody delivers. So even if everybody would have delivered before December, which they didn't, we would have found out that during integration testing and system testing that we had loads of bugs to fix, which of course everybody knows takes an undefined amount of time to fix. And actually, there's a neat story about that. I was working in another company and we looked at the time it takes to fix enough bugs to go to market. And we noticed that for small projects, it took about 3 months to fix the bugs before, after you delivered everything until you were ready to go to the market, about 3 months. Then we look at mid-sized projects, so different sizes. We looked at mid-sized projects and it turns out that it was 12 weeks. 12 weeks from delivering everything to being ready to go to the market. And then we go like, how about big projects? And we looked at the big project data and we found out that the time it takes to go from everybody has delivered everything to ready to go to the market was 90 days. Now, when you look back, it's like, this is interesting. How come small, medium, and large projects all take the same time from being ready to being actually ready to go to the market? And of course, there's no coincidence in these things. So as we investigated this, we found out that what happened was that management was willing to wait only 3 months. So at the end of the 3 months, they would come to the team and say, either you guys release now or we're canning the project. So the 3 months, which we thought was a very nice estimate for the validation phase for the project, it was just the size of the patience meter for management. Now, of course, one must ask if when we deliver is more dependent on management's patience than it is on our work, what the hell do we estimate? Of course, we should estimate management's patience. That's the answer. So, but coming back to this big project, Ari was adamant, we'll deliver on time. And I was looking at the data, and of course, I knew it was not going to happen. So, 18 months into a 6-month project, in June, management came down and said, we're canceling the project because you guys are not ready. We're already 6 months late, and we need to put effort into some other work. That was 90 million euros to the garbage can. Now, if they would have just paid me 1% for saving 2/3 of this, I would be happy. They would be happy. We would all make money. Think about that for a second. 6 months into this project, they knew they were going to be late. Before that, I had already told them we are going to be late. They could have canceled this project, at least after 6 months. They would have saved 2/3 of this amount of money. Why do we do this? Why do we keep on throwing bad money, good money after bad projects? And of course, one has to then consider, what have we as an Agile community done to improve the situation? Well, not much. I mean, think about this for a second. There's some people out there advocating the use of magic numbers such as velocity focus factor, velocity multiplier, depending on the size of the team and the experience and whatever. We're just trying to complexify something that really is rather easy. And why do we do that? Well, there's a reason for that. You see this thing here? How many of you know what this is? Somebody knows. What is it? Yes, it is a work breakdown structure. It's an amazing invention. You will notice that this is written in German. That's good because they are very exact about what needs to be done. And you have the project at the top. This is our project, our little baby here. And then we have the work packages here on the second line. And then we have the tasks for each of the work packages. And we cross those that are done. We mark red those that were late. And the ones that are not crossed are those that are not yet done. And this way we know when the project is going to be done. Because this describes everything that needs to be done. Or so the theory goes. Now, you will notice how this looks very much like one of these. And this is the Portuguese man-o-war, by the way. It's one of the most poisonous animals out there. If you see one of these, swim away as quickly as you can. And don't touch the tentacles here. And don't touch these tentacles here either. It's a waste of time. The thing is that the system that we had before is not going to help us with software development. One could argue is not going to help us with other industries, but I don't work in other industries. I work with software product development. So the old system is not going to work. And one of the things that we know already, and there's plenty of books and articles and interviews and podcasts and so on about this, is that if you work in a bad system, you're going to get bad results because a bad system will beat a good person every day. In fact, what we should be focusing on is on finding better systems. Just like these guys did. You know what this is? This is the Shinkansen. It's one of the fastest trains in the world. It's made in Japan, although apparently the Chinese have copied it and improved it already. But this train was built to be on time. Now, I don't know how the trains in Sweden work. I get this everywhere. It's amazing. It seems that every train in the world is run with waterfall. But this train is always on time. Their average delay in 2014 was 54 seconds. That was the average delay, and that includes natural catastrophes. You know, they have a lot of earthquakes and stuff like that. In 1997, the record for their average delay being the lowest, the average delay was 18 seconds. 1-8, 18 seconds. Amazing. Now, how come they did this? Well, very simple. They looked at the old trains, and they figured out that there's no way we can improve this system. So let's build a new system. And that's what they did. This train runs on tracks that are isolated from animals and other traffic. There's no way a car can cross the line, and the tracks are protected from animals crossing the lines. Also, another thing is that there's always two directions in the tracks. So you can never be stopped by a crossing with a train that is coming in the other direction. And of course, the train goes much faster than it needs to in order to keep the schedule so that they can recover when something happens. This train was designed to be on time. They already knew most of the problems that cause delays in the other trains, and they just removed the root causes. Now, if you go to a meeting in Tokyo and you're in one of these, you're probably going to be there, half an hour before the meeting starts, just in time to get into the meeting without losing much time. If you live in Finland, where I live, we have 4 root causes for train delays. The first one is winter. Second one is spring. Third one is summer. And the fourth one are the leaves in the fall that, crowd the trees and make the trains go slower. So if I have to go to a meeting in, say, Tampere, which is 2 hours away from Helsinki, where I live, I probably take the train that gets there 2 hours before, just in case my train doesn't come and I have to take the next one. And I always have the number of some taxi drivers on the way, just in case the train stops and I need to call a taxi to get me to my meeting. And when I'm traveling that way, I'm always stressed. I'm always worried. But when I'm traveling in a train like this, I'm never stressed. I'm never worried. How do your projects feel like? Do they feel more like the Shinkansen or the Finnish train system? So if they feel more like the Shinkansen, great, please do share what you've learned. We have a lot to learn about that. If they feel more like the Finnish train system, then look at the root causes. And I'm pretty sure that one of the problems you will find is that we can't deliver on time. And it's okay, most people in the world can't deliver on time either. You're not alone. So we need something much simpler, something that I would call a theory-free zone. Let's stop worrying about making estimation a PhD problem. Yes, there's a lot of people with PhDs in project estimation. And guess what? Not even they can make projects run on time. One would think that if you spend 10, 15 years studying projects and studying scheduling and trying to figure out how projects can be delivered on time, and you still can't do it, you would look elsewhere. So that's what I promise in this talk is a stress-free zone that solves 3 problems. First, speed and distance without estimates. Because just like in a car, if you know how far you are from the destination and you know your average speed, you know when you're going to be there. We are going to talk about removing risk of failure without spending all the time planning. Because if you have to spend all of your time planning, then probably risk removal is too expensive. So what else can we do? And then finally, how to deliver on business goals without waiting until the end of the project to figure out if you've actually done it. So here's number 1. This was one of the first things that I understood from NoEstimates, and this is what I write in the book. This is how I got started. I call this the Disneyland heuristic. And it's quite simple. If we are going to Disneyland in Paris, and let's assume it's 1,000 kilometers. I don't know how many it is, but let's assume it's 1,000. And we know that we're going to do around 100 kilometers an hour on average. Then we know we're going to take 10 hours. Give or take a couple of hours to take a rest and have some food and refuel, then it's 12 hours. In 12 hours, we can reach Disneyland in Paris. Would you agree that's a feasible way to know when you're going to arrive? Okay. Now, if we could do this in projects, if we knew the speed at which we are delivering stuff, and if we knew how much stuff there is to deliver, would we also be able to deliver on time with projects? Would you agree? Yeah? Okay. So here's what we found from real data. This is just one, but there are many examples. Corey Foy published this data on Twitter, and there are many other examples out there as well. This is a chart with a snapshot of a team of 20 teams. So there's 20 teams involved in this project, and over a 2-year period. And we see the story point sizes here, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. And then we see these black lines that go almost from the bottom all the way to whatever their peak is. And this is the minimum duration and the maximum duration of a story of that size. So for example, we know that stories of size 8 took something between 5 to 280 days to deliver. Okay, cool. Then we have these small triangles here. And look at how they are distributed. These triangles are all at about the same level. There's some difference. So let's say the highest is 8, which is probably around 40. And the lowest is, let's take these 2 off, but let's take 2 here. And 2 is around maybe 20. So 40, 20, something like that. But the triangles are the average time it takes to deliver a story of that size. Now think about it for a second. Stories of size 0 take about 25 to 30 days to deliver on average. Stories of size 5 take about 25 to 30 days to deliver on average. Stories of size 1, 30 to 40, maybe 35 days to deliver on average. Wait a minute, are you telling me that stories of different size take, on average, the same amount of time to deliver? Yeah. That's what I'm telling you. It doesn't matter how much you've estimated the story to be. So for example, 20 you know is going to be more than 2, but 5 and 1 are the same. So on average, the stories take about the same amount of time to deliver. If you're looking at, over a 2-year period, so let's say that that's how much time you've got, and you know how many of these stories you have in the backlog, you already know that doesn't matter what size they end up being, you more or less know how many stories you can deliver in 2 years. And this average cycle time, the green triangle here, is your speed in the Disneyland heuristic. And the distance is very simple. How many stories do you have in the backlog? Now, if you know your speed and you know your distance, would you agree that you can know when you're going to deliver? And this is what is happening in reality. Now, of course, I'm making a big assumption here, and the assumption here is that you're working in an agile way of working, right? If you're working in waterfall, forget about this, because the when will you deliver question can only be answered by how big is the patience of your leadership, as we've seen in the previous example, right? Because you find the problems later on when you're trying to integrate everything. But if you integrate every day, if you have a production-ready system every day or every week, depends on how long it takes for you to integrate, and you know that the time it takes to deliver a story is going to be pretty much similar no matter how much size you think it is or what size you think it is. Then you know your speed, you know your distance, and you can deliver. So this solves one problem. But there's more examples. Here's one testimonial, somebody who read the book, and he studied all of the data that he had, 50 sprints, all of 50 sprints of data that they had. And they compared that with story points. And it says the deviation between estimated and actual velocity, so estimated is story points, not Gantt chart, just to make that clear, would have been approximately 15% lower if we would have used no estimates. So they would have been 15% more accurate by just counting the number of stories than by using the story points. And we analyzed data from 50 sprints, and at no time was the story point-based estimation better than no estimates at predicting when we would deliver something. Here's another example. How many of you guys have been pressured to deliver an arbitrary number of stories at the end of a sprint or a month or whatever? Here's how I would react if this would happen to me. And this actually did. Here's the number of stories the team was delivering every single sprint for 21 sprints. And the manager comes in and says, hey, next sprint we need to deliver 10 stories. What would you do to deliver 10 stories? Any ideas? Add more people, because that usually works, right? Game the system, yeah. So 1972, the Mythical Man Month, please read the book. And Fred Brooks writes in the book, adding more people to a late project only makes it more late. And this was already in the 70s, so this is stuff that we've known for a long time. So adding more people does not make a software project faster. It typically does the opposite. It makes it slower. Gaming the system. That was a very smart observation, Bjorn, but how would you game the system? Make the story smaller. Something else? Make the sprint longer. Cheat, lie, fake, bribe the testers to not find bugs. This is what you can do. Because the system is pretty clear. You are going to deliver between 1 and 5 stories, mostly around 3 to 4. maybe 2. That's it. We already have the data. You have this data for your team. Why aren't you using it? Why is it that we believe that guessing is better than looking at what we already have? So insight number 1 that we covered today, just counting the stories you have is your speed. The backlog is your distance. So if you have to tell somebody when something is going to be delivered, then forecast, and you will quickly know how long it takes until we get there. This is one of the practices we learn about in the NoEstimates workshop. We actually do this in practice using data from your project. And we learn about what is a system, how do we know if we can use the data or not, because not all systems are stable, and if the system isn't stable, you can't actually know if you can use the data, so how do we handle that? And we will model future deliveries to know the distance and how long it takes to cover it. This is the first thing I would like you guys to take away from this talk. You can predict progress with NoEstimates using the Disneyland heuristic. If the questions you have require you to know progress, estimation will never, ever answer that question, because estimation is about the future. It has no information about the past. If you don't integrate every day or every week, you have no clue how much you have progressed. Because, you know, in project management school, how many of you guys have done project management school, by the way? I'm a recovering project manager. Sometimes I still fall back in old habits, but I try not to. I've been sober for 6 years now. And the problem we have is that even the words we use in project management are there to deceive you. So some of you guys that have done project management have probably heard of a term, which is a technique called earned value curve. Have you heard about that? And you know that in the 60s it was made mandatory by the US government for all projects. Okay, so let's analyze what that means. First of all, earned. It's not earned, it's spent because it's cost. Second, value. It's not value because you're spending money. You're measuring the rate of spending money. Has nothing to do with value. You can spend all of the money and deliver no value. Third, it is a curve, so that part is correct. But think about the things that people make you study with the words that they use, and then think about it. Do they really believe this could work? If they would, why do they use the words that mean the opposite of what it is? Unfortunately, many projects are still measured today on how much money they spent, not how much value they delivered. This is the critical change when you go into Agile, because we don't assume we know if we've delivered value. We test it. We test it in the market. Fundamental difference. This is why we can remove the risk of failure without spending all of the time planning. But how? Let me just first introduce an idea here. Be aware of complex solutions. We've been delivering projects on time or late for thousands of years. How many Roman structures do you have in the south of Sweden? You must have some, right? Some bridges, some walls. Okay, at least Viking structures, you have some. They're still there, right? They were delivered, they fulfilled the purpose, and they survived thousands of years. In Portugal, where I come from, we have loads of stuff from the Romans that we are still using today. Bridges are a very good example. There's still cars going over those damn bridges. Cars, trucks. Bridges that were built for carts with horses and soldiers can withstand the pressure and the weight of trucks and cars today. How about foresight, huh? But here's the thing, they didn't try to complexify things. One of the things that distinguishes the Greeks from the Romans is that the Romans did it and the Greeks talked about it. So you need to choose, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be a Roman or a Greek? Be aware of complex solutions. Here's an example. How many of you guys believe that birds can fly? I believe, not all birds, but most birds can fly. Now, you know this already from experience and actually seeing some birds, and then you go to the library, maybe even in the campus here, and you read a book, and the book explains all of the aerodynamic and mechanical aspects of bird flight, and the author claims, I taught birds how to fly. Would you believe the author? No, because you go like, dude, I've seen birds fly. They can't read. There's no way they would have learned from you. So here's the thing. You know which project managers deliver projects on time? The project managers that actually do it. Not the guys who write books about it. The people who deliver projects on time have delivered many projects late. They know what works, not from theory, but from practice. The only people I would trust to deliver a project on time would be a project manager with a lot of experience and that claims up front, I don't follow the rules. Because that's the only way you can deliver projects on time. If you follow the rules, if you follow the books, you will not be able to do it. And this is the teaching birds how to fly phenomena. We think that by reading books, we learn to deliver projects on time. And that doesn't happen. Here's an example that has happened to you. How many of you guys can ride a bicycle? How many of you guys studied the physics and the theory of riding a bicycle? 2 people. The 2 people who did you learn to ride a bicycle before you studied or after? Okay, one. Pontus can't still ride a bicycle, and I can guarantee reading about it won't help either. How about before? Yes. How do people learn to ride a bicycle? By falling. You can't learn to ride a bicycle if you don't fall. But, of course, it will not surprise you to know that there's a pretty deep science about cycling. There's quite a lot of books. This is just one of them. Bicycling Science. This guy did not read that book. If he had tried to do this stunt by learning it from a book, he would not have made it. I'm not sure this guy even went to school. I mean, with all the broken bones, one can only imagine how much effort and visits to the hospital it took to learn to do that. But it's quite amazing, huh? He does amazing stuff. And this is what I found out, is that as I studied a lot about project management, and I always had this question, how do we deliver on time? How can I deliver on time? I passed all the tests, I read all the books, and I still couldn't deliver on time. It's pretty much like that bicycle here. If you try to ride the bicycle and do the stunts by reading books, this is what will happen. You'll be fed up, you'll stop. The thing is, 1 day of observation is worth 10 days of schooling. Unfortunately, the people who wrote the first Agile estimation and planning books were not aware of this. One of this is a PERT chart, and the other one is a Agile guru trying to tell you how to do project estimation and planning in Agile. Which one is which? Any idea? Which one of this is the PERT chart? All right. That's a dead giveaway, right? But otherwise, this is the PERT chart. This is an Agile guru. This thing here, which is in an Agile estimation and planning book, breaks all of the Agile principles. First of all, these are not cross-functional teams, as you can clearly see. Second, they do not have independent stories that deliver value early and often. In fact, we know that in order to deliver this, some other team would have had to deliver something else. What we are trying to do with Agile is to use the old system in a new environment. It just doesn't work. We're trying the wrong tools. in a new environment. We need new tools. Here's one tool that I've come up with because I didn't want to discuss numbers. And one of the things that I was hearing all the time, well, but if you don't talk about numbers, you don't know what the stories are about. And I go like, yes, you can know. So I asked my teams to talk about social complexity and technical complexity of the stories they need to deliver. Social complexity is how many people do we need to talk to get this work done? How many approvals do we need to get? If it's none, it's going to be, of course, very low social complexity. If you need to talk to 3 different teams and 5 managers, it's going to be very high social complexity. So you might want to take that into account and maybe even break down the work to remove the need to have so many approvals. There's many things we can do, both technically as well as organizationally, to remove that social complexity. And then the other aspect is higher technical complexity. So if I need to touch 20 different modules and I need to integrate with God knows how many modules in order to test and verify that my functionality works, that's high technical complexity. If I can do stuff on my own and just produce a class and test it on my own, then it's probably going to be very low technical complexity. These things are not fuzzy. We can agree if this needs to touch 20 modules or 1 module. We can agree if we need to talk to 5 different managers or no managers. If we need to talk to 2 different teams or no teams. We can agree on that. We can even decide our implementation strategy to avoid specific aspects that increase social and technical complexity. This is both concrete and actionable. If you find something that is high social complexity and high technical complexity, you might want to change the architecture or change the teams in order to remove that complexity. You know what does not guarantee delivery on time is the increase in complexity. If by design you're increasing the complexity of the work that you do, just as the Agile Guru is suggesting here, then you're reducing your chances to deliver on time. So this simple matrix, which you can do in a sprint planning in a matter of minutes for large amounts of stories, right? Because you will only need to discuss the ones that are here, and you may want to discuss 1 or 2 stories that are here. The ones that are here, you just go, just do it. We don't need to talk about it. We trust each other to do the right things because the stories are independent. They can be delivered and integrated early and often. So if something that is here is done wrong, we will know it immediately. We don't need to worry about it. The problems come here specifically, and sometimes here, and sometimes here. Those are the ones we need to worry about. And we may want to take the stories here and break them down to move them either here or here. Breaking work down is the lost art of agility. The core of Agile is to remove complexity. Think about this for a second. This is a study from McKinsey and the University of Oxford. 17% of large IT projects go so badly that they can threaten the very existence of the company. The same happens with big stories. The bigger the story, the more likely it is that you will fail to deliver. The more technical complexity, the more likely it is that you will fail to deliver. The higher social complexity, the more likely it is that you will fail to deliver. So breaking work down should be our basic process in the team. And this should be core of our practice as Agile teams, removing social and technical complexity. In the NoEstimates workshop, we go into a lot more detail about this. We talk about how to reduce risk, how to never fail to deliver. I have a blog post about that up on the blog. Turn 6-month projects into 1 day. This is actually an exercise we do in the workshop. How do you turn a 6-month project into a 1-day project? And an 18-month project into 2 weeks. That's actually a story we hear from another Agilist. And this gets us to insight number 2. We should break work down for risk removal, for complexity removal, not for size. When we talk about estimates, we're talking about size. Size is fuzzy. What does it mean? What does a story point mean? Nobody agrees. You ask 20 Agilists what the story point is, and you will get 40 different answers. There's no single agreement of what it means. So this is insight number 2. Agree on the meaning of the work with social and technical complexity as the parameters, and that, when you break them down, we remove risk. Finally, how do we deliver on business goals without waiting until the end of the project to know? One of the biggest problems I have when working with clients is that they don't understand what value means for them. I was working with an Agile coach and a product manager that I was coaching, and I asked, hey guys, have you defined what value is for your product? And they said, what do you mean? I mean, we have the value points. They were using value points for the backlog items. No, I mean, how do you know if something is valuable or not valuable? Not the value points. What is value? What is success for your product? And they said, we don't have a definition of that. And then I asked, why don't you ask the stakeholders? So they asked the stakeholders. They tried to get everybody together, but they couldn't. There were 3 stakeholders, and you know, stakeholders are always busy. So they had to have one-on-one meetings with 3 stakeholders. A week later, they had 3 definitions of value. Different, mutually exclusive definitions of value. Now, you're laughing because this sounds ridiculous, but this is the normal case. The thing is that projects are started typically, especially if they are projects, based on an estimate of cost and a return on investment that is a very high level return based on a business plan with net present value, whatever is the method you try to use to calculate the return. But it's money. But money is an outcome, it's not a value. If you deliver value, you get money. So first, what is the value? Here are 5 different goal-driven decision-making strategies for your project you can use right now that require no estimates. The first, do the most important strategic work first. If the biggest risk is our strategy correct? You should first test that. In order to do that, you need to first do the work, because you can't test things in a PowerPoint. I know many PMOs still test the validity of choosing a project over another by looking at a PowerPoint. That's a ridiculous idea, because the market will not read the same PowerPoint. So how do they know? They don't need to follow your assumptions. So if your biggest assumptions are strategic, test those first. Second, do the highest technical risk work first. This seems obvious because it's also part of Scrum. If the biggest risks are technological, do that first. Third one is do the easiest work first. We heard about self-organization in the previous talk by Karin. How many of you guys know how to get a team up to speed really, really quickly? One simple technique you can get that will get you a team working in less than a week, very well working together. But football clubs do this every single beginning of a season. What do all football clubs do at the beginning of a season? They play smaller clubs. They play easier teams. And why? Very simple. When you're focusing on getting the team to work together, you don't want to focus on getting them to the top level of performance. You just want to focus on getting them to talk to each other, to meet each other, to learn how each other reacts in certain situations. This is how you do it. You did the easiest work first. If you're starting a new team, this is what you should be doing. Doesn't matter what the estimate is. Get the team to work well together first. Then next, do the legal requirements first. If you're a health company or a healthcare company, I worked with one that had a project that was expected to take 3 years. And in the healthcare business, you need to be certified, and you can't even show the product to doctors before you're certified. So what did they do? They spent the first year coming up with an implementation that would solve all of the certification requirements, but not all of the requirements for the product, just the certification requirements. The moment they met the certification, they weren't going to sell the product, but they were allowed to show the product to their customers, When they did that, they immediately got meetings with hospitals and doctors to talk about the benefits of the product, and it was okay because the product was certified. Then they spent the next 2 years incorporating the feedback and getting ready for the final release, while all of their competitors waited for the end of the 3 years before they started selling the product. Immediate market advantage. What did they do? They listed the legal requirements and they did that first. Does it matter that it takes longer to do a legal requirement than some other requirement? No, because this is what matters for us. And then finally, the one that every startup does, or almost every startup does. Try to get some money first, right? Liability-driven investment model. You do the work that generates the revenues first. These are just 5. There's many other decision-making strategies that require no estimates. But the most important part is how we break down the work. If we can break down any piece of work to a daily increment, we immediately eliminate the risk of project failure because every day we get something. And if we don't get it on the first day, we get it on the second day. We can predict the release date months ahead and adjust the scope to meet that release date because scope is independent. You can deliver something and not deliver something else. You know your distance, you know your speed. You can predict the release date. We can help the product owner maintain a realistic backlog so that you don't have to go through many hours of backlog grooming that are extremely boring and, of course, mostly useless because who cares about item number 200 in the backlog if we're likely to deliver only 70? The question is, which 70 should we deliver? And then a fun way to manage projects without the risk of burnout or a death march, which is my favorite reason to use NoEstimates. There's a lot of stuff behind this. I won't bore you with all of the details. In the workshop, we hear the story of this guy, Clinton Keith, who delivered a 18-month project in 2 weeks. 18 months project in 2 weeks. How do we know it was 18 months? Because he had done a similar project in the past. How did it make it in 2 weeks? Well, that's something you guys need to go to the workshop to find out. And later on today, I think it's at 1:10, I will be demonstrating how you can break any piece of work into a 24-hour increment. I'm not going to come up with a toy example. We're going to use your project. Something that you think, and this is important, right now you think is impossible to break down. Something that has to be delivered, quote unquote, as a whole. There's no way we can deliver only part of this. And we will work through that, and you will get out of that demo with a very clear, concrete, actionable list of 24-hour increments to deliver that unbreakable piece of work that you think can only be delivered as a monolith. This will be the demo then at 1 o'clock. But as we finish, insight number 3, and this is what we're going to talk about also in the demo, work only on experiments that get you closer to the goal. They might be business experiments, they might be technology experiments, they might be organizational experiments, but only experiments, 24-hour experiments that get you closer to the goal. If you do that, estimation is no longer needed because every day you have progress. And if you know the speed and you know the distance, you know when you're going to deliver. But keep this in mind. Software is a very expensive tool. Delivering software has to be the last option in our list of options to deliver value to the market. A very clear example is when I go to a project management office approval meeting and we talk about, okay, how much are we going to spend in this project? And people say, oh, $500,000. And then I ask, how many years is this project going to be live if it is a success? Or maybe 10 years. How much money are you going to spend during those 10 years? And typically it's a lot more than the project we are approving, but nobody talks about those costs. Maintenance in software is much higher than the actual cost. The last, actually almost last takeaway, break things down for value, not effort. And we'll demo that later on. But there's one last thing before I finish. Always use ridiculously short time boxes. 1 day. instead of trying to estimate everything. Deliver every day. Validate that you're delivering the right things every day. Integrate every day. If you know the distance and you know the speed, you know when you're going to get there. Thank you very much.